First, though, has the Prime Minister lost control of our borders? 020 7862 2222. Love to hear from you on this. On Saturday, around 1,200 people, 1,200 crossed the Channel in small boats from northern France. This is the highest number making the crossing in a single day this year. It takes the total so far this year to more than 14,800. And that's the highest number for the first 5 months in the year since small boats started doing these crossings in 2018. So, yeah, whatever's happened, we're not in control of it, that's for sure. Boats arriving like taxis as migrant numbers surge. And remember, this was a big part of the general election campaign for all the parties. The Conservatives said it was a day of shame for the government. They claim the Prime Minister has lost control. Keir Starmer has promised to smash the gangs, helping people cross into the country illegally. He wants to crack down on net migration more generally, making it tougher for migrants to live and work here. This seems like a massive story, though, Reem.
It is. I think what's interesting is a lot of it is being conflated with legal migration. So we've got high numbers of illegal immigration, which is what makes a lot of people very, very upset. I mean, 1,200 in a single day is insane. And I think we've got to be very clear about this. If you come to this country and break the law, you should not be allowed to reside here. However, what Keir Starmer and the government have been doing is trying to reduce overall migration by reducing the people that actually work and contribute. Now, I am very, very pro-immigration. I think that if you come here legally, you should be allowed to work and contribute. And we know that migrants are generally speaking net contributors to the Treasury. Fundamentally, people are upset about illegal immigration, but it's hard for them to get down those numbers. So what they're doing is they're getting rid of the people that we actually want.
Well, so the legal migration is about 750,000, and this is about 50,000.
Yeah.
But this is the thing that really annoys people, Zack.
Yeah, well, I think when we look at the small boats, there's a very easy way to stop the small boats, and that's to create safe and legal routes. No one who is fleeing...
Why would someone who comes here illegally take a legal route?
Because no one who is fleeing their life or fleeing from persecution wants to get on a small dinghy and live their life, in treacherous circumstances. People do this because they are desperate. And actually, there should be no such thing as an illegal migrant. What should happen is that people should go to processing centres where they are processed in a fair and due process and then decided whether they can come here legally or if they're not allowed to come here.
Go on.
Well, so where I agree with Zack is that the processing needs to speed up, and the fact that there is such a huge backlog of people, again, these asylum seekers or quote unquote asylum seekers aren't allowed to work when they're in that limbo period, when they're waiting for their asylum application to be processed. But this is about the principle of it. If somebody comes here illegally, they should not be granted a free taxpayer-funded hotel room. They should not be granted huge amounts of money. Now, again, the amount of money we spend on these asylum seekers, I think, is really what upsets people. You can't break the law and come here illegally, commit a whole host of crimes, and at the exact same time be given taxpayer-funded hotel rooms, and people are literally struggling so much and they're paying huge amounts in taxes. I also just want to pick up on a point that Zack made.
Let
Zack come in. Yeah.
I don't think there's any evidence that people seeking asylum are more likely to commit crime. And actually, if anything, there's evidence the opposite. They're more likely to be grateful that they're in this country, that they're fleeing war and persecution, and actually they've come here to contribute to it. We also know, as you pretty much outlined, that when we look at migration, these are the people who work in our hospitals and our construction firm or our hospitality. Of course, we need to train British people as well. But actually, ultimately, we know there are huge vacancies in these areas. And when you say to people, do you want migration to be low? And most people say yes. But then when you say, what sector do you want to not have jobs for? What sector do you want to be understaffed? People very quickly change their mind. And I think there's been a failure of politicians
this is my problem
to
with
make
the
this
approach.
case.
People care about illegal migration. I want those vacancies filled. And if it has to be by migrants, I don't care. People are upset about people coming on boats, and I'm sorry, but somebody fleeing France is not fleeing war and persecution. France is a safe country, and if you've come on a boat from France to the UK, you are an economic migrant.
Let's go to Derek in Northamptonshire. What do you think, Derek? It was a very big day yesterday, wasn't it?
It was indeed. Good morning, Jeremy and panel.
Yeah, Saturday, I should say, was the day, yeah.
Saturday was the day, wasn't it? Yes. The thought that comes to my mind, my opinion is that actually the government has not made any serious attempt to do anything about it. So I'm drawn to the conclusion that actually the government doesn't want to do anything about it because it believes that migration is good for us. But
I don't know. I think if you're Keir Starmer, you probably can feel the Bunsen burner here because he made these promises at the election. and he can feel support ebbing away. Look at the local election results, and he doesn't want that.
Well, that's true. I think he's pulling out all sorts of stuff to try and recover their support, which they seem to have not been very successful at achieving in the.
But do you think he's got any chance of so-called smashing the gangs, Derek, which is the promise?
Well, it's a proposal he's put forward, but I don't really think it's a very serious proposition. It's not very likely to be successful. I think there are much more effective ways he could control immigration, if it was really serious about doing something about it. I mean, Australia, for example, is well known as controlled migration, so it is possible, so surely we could do something similar.
Can I ask, Derek, what is it about migration specifically that somebody like you would be upset about?
I'm simply concerned that if population grows and grows, that all our public services will be overloaded. That is the issue, I think, that would concern me most. But
OK, thank you, Derek, very much. Oswald in Leicester, hi.
Hi, Jeremy.
What do you think?
The deal that they've made with the French is gone. That's what they've lost.
Yeah.
I mean, you have the police standing there that's watching people get on the boats.
So this is a photo from the papers today, which a lot of people have been talking about, where they are basically just standing there.
Yeah. Yeah. Why are they standing there?
Well, here's an answer to that. If it was the other way round and they were all leaving Britain to go to France, our police would just stand there, wouldn't they?
So there you go then.
Well,
so that money that we're paying these people is a waste of time.
I think what Derek was saying was so important that ultimately he's worried about our public services, and we should be worried about our public services. But these are not the problems of migrants and people seeking asylum. These are the problems of decades of underinvestment in our public services. So the answer here is for the government to actually tackle inequality, and again, by taxing multimillionaires and billionaires.
Quite frankly, we already spend huge amounts of money. The government already spend huge amounts of money. I mean, half of GDP is government spending, half the economy. We are paying huge amounts in taxes, and this is not the solution. I don't think, by the way, solving or stopping migration is the solution. What we need to do is reduce and get rid of the shackles of the state, get rid of huge swathes of regulations and red tape, ensure that this country is an attractive place to invest. And people like Derek might finally be happy with
when we talk about getting rid of regulations.
We'll come back. We're going to take a break and then more on it, I promise. Has the Prime Minister lost control of our borders? It's after more than 1,000 people crossed the Channel in small boats just on Saturday. The Conservatives called it a day of shame. But should they take responsibility as well? Now, more of your calls on whether the Prime Minister has lost control of our borders. So 1,200 people crossed the Channel in small boats on Saturday, apparently. The highest number recorded in a single day so far this year. We were told Labour were going to smash the gangs. Obviously hasn't happened yet. Angela in Derbyshire, is this down to the government?
Possibly so, yes. But I don't think he's necessarily lost control. I just think people are expecting too much from him. Within the first year, let's say. So I think all these years where it's been happening, people are expecting a quick fix. And I do think that's not going to happen overnight. I do believe there should be a different way for people to be able to enter the country. As in, we used to have things on telly like Border Force or, where they stopped them at the borders, let's say, and they're able to turn them around again. I don't know why we can't give them a safe route of entry to the country and then be able to turn them away again at the airports or at the...
I must say, I don't quite understand how this safe route argument says you've got, let's say, 1,000 people and they're all asked to come here and you say 200 can come here, so that's great, and the other 800 will go back on the boats and try and come in another way. So I don't think it's always given as the answer. How is that the answer?
I don't think it will necessarily be like that. I do think it would stop the trafficking gangs, is my point. So they'll be able to come from their own country and they'll be able to come from the next country along and say that they come here.
What do you think, Zack, about? Let me ask for Zack that question. So
70% of asylum claims are granted, and it's actually 80% on appeal. So the vast majority of people who are coming here are coming here for legitimate reasons. So the question is,
from France, though?
Because
France.
People can come from France because they've come from anywhere else, from Afghanistan, Libya, Syria, places we've all had a role in creating or exacerbating conflict. And so I think we have a moral responsibility to show dignity, humanity and compassion towards some of the most
on that basis,
people.
that's anyone from Syria, though, right?
If dignity, humanity and compassion includes taxpayers in this country working incredibly hard and having all of that money being spent, or a lot of that money being spent on these people being housed in taxpayer-funded hotel rooms, I think that's what people are upset about.
But this economic argument's absurd because we know they are a net benefit. They're much more likely to pay money in tax.
Is that true?
From social security.
So it's true when you look at migrants as a whole. Migrants as a whole contribute more to the Treasury than they take out, but it isn't true when you look at certain countries in isolation. So if you look at a lot of migration, a lot of illegal migration that we have at the moment, when you look at those countries in isolation, a lot of those people are a net drain. You cannot put an American that comes to London and works in the city in the same category as an illegal migrant fleeing Syria. They just don't contribute in the same numbers. They don't contribute in the same way. So look, I'm pro-migration, but you cannot say, look at the overall numbers.
I didn't realise it
You've got
included
to look
Americans
specifically.
working in the city. Okay. Heather in Hampshire, hi.
Oh, good morning to you.
What do you think? Is this Starmer's fault?
Not exactly. I think it's a very difficult problem. And I think we've got to be a little bit clever and think originally, and we've got to make us less attractive. We need a stronger deterrent. And I'm afraid this is a bit of a strong idea, and it will offend many people, I expect. But why don't they simply throw their mobile phones into the sea and broadcast it? Let it become a myth that if you cross in a boat to England, you'll lose your smartphone, and it'll stop them wanting to come.
Would that if people are fleeing their lives, would that make a difference? I don't know.
Absolutely right. I mean, Heather, I understand
the idea of it.
I understand your perspective on the throwing of the phones. What's interesting is there have been a lot of videos of people, illegal migrants on those boats, filming themselves on TikTok, then saying, you know what, I'm throwing my documents in the sea, so when I get to the UK, they won't know who I am.
But
that's what's absurd.
But they would still come, Heather, despite losing their phone. That's all I'm wondering about, whether that would work.
It might be a start, and surely we've got the technology to blight these mobile phones before.
Zack, what do you think of this? Too harsh?
I think it's way too harsh. I think these are not just numbers. These aren't statistics. These are people's lives, and they all have a story. And very often they are fleeing unimaginable circumstances.
What, France?
And the idea, we've come here again.
France,
people come through France because they've often fled a war-torn country. I think the idea that people would face that kind of tragedy and trauma in their lives, and then we would add further cruelty to them, I don't think bears worth thinking about. I think, again, we arrived at this position when people already feel insecure about their lives because of the inequality in our society. And actually, I think if we tackle that, we'll see people wanting to be much more compassionate towards migrants.
All right, Heather, thank you very much. Chris is also in Hampshire. Hello, Chris.
Good morning, Jeremy.
What would you like to say?
Well, I think Keir Starmer is in the best position to actually control this because of his background on the prosecution and that kind of thing. So, yeah, I don't think actually it's an issue. Really,
not an issue.
Blown out of proportion. No, because we hear so much in the news about the UK population ageing, and particularly women to have more children to sort of prop up pensioners. So if we actually encourage immigrants or migrants, to call it, into the country, then we've actually imported the next generation who hopefully will contribute to society. And prop up the pensioners. Yeah,
but there is. Hang on, there is a kind of a fairness issue, isn't there? That if you play by the rules and you pay your taxes and so on, and you know, there'll be people here, for example, who've applied for residency and citizenship and have had to go through all kinds of payments and bureaucracy, and then someone comes on a boat, they just feel that's unfair, Chris.
Yeah, I think the boat crossings is a bit dodgy. It's obviously putting their lives at risk. But I think as regards crossings, yes, we could do a lot more with our European partners to sort of police it a bit better. But yes, there are these gangs, and Keir Starmer is right in trying to control the gangs who actually, encourage these dinghy crossings and that kind of thing.
Okay, go on, Zack, yeah.
Chris, you're spot on about the ageing population, because ultimately we know the biggest part of our welfare bill is pensions, and it's pensioners, people who have rightly worked all of their lives and deserve to be looked after by the state. And actually, as we have an ageing population, we are going to need younger people to keep contributing into that pot to make sure that people who are older in their lives are looked after. And I think that doesn't just come from refugees and migrants, but actually this is a big part of it. And
the young people don't think they're going to get pensions, so they
I'm almost certainly not going to get a.
No, of course, she's going to fund my pension, and she won't get one herself. How fair is that?
Well, I think that's why we need to protect the state and make sure that there is.
I think it's why we
a
need
proper
to reform
pension
the state.
scheme.
I think this is a really important point, though, that Chris raises. The fact that we've got an ageing population, we need those people working. Just to play devil's advocate here, I think there is an element of the question of cultural hegemony, but also the way in which this looks for integration. How many of those people actually integrate into British society and are pro-British? I mean, a lot of people are saying, we've got declining birth rates because people can't afford it. I would like to see British people having more children. I want to see people with British values encouraging that and actually having more of those particular people, but also ensuring that people that do come to the UK are integrating. And this is something that I think is really important for a lot of people.
Okay.
People that are upset about migration are upset about illegal immigration, and people that don't
Let's
integrate.
get another call. Christopher in Kent, hi.
Oh, good morning, everybody.
Do you think that this is a big bad day on Saturday or not?
Well, yes, I think it is. But, the previous government had the problem as well. And I think the issue is the unwillingness and incompetence, really, of the French authorities. Because I can't believe that in this day and age of drones that they can't spot, in advance people preparing the boats to cross the channel. Also, if it was French national treasures being smuggled out of the country on a daily basis, I'm sure they would have acted sooner. I think there's also a wider issue relating to Schengen. I mean, it must have been like Christmas came early for the criminal gangs and the migrants when all the borders were taken away by order of, Brussels. And of course, there's nothing, they can travel thousands of miles across various countries without ever being challenged. That's a problem.
Thank you, Christopher. I think we've got time for one more call. Who's next on the line? So, Justin in Dorset, hi.
Oh, morning. Hello.
Go ahead.
Hiya. Yeah, Starmer's definitely lost control because he never had control to start with, to be honest with you. The French could do a lot more. They've got a massive army. They're plotted up in bases all around the country. Why don't they do military drills and exercises on the beaches? And then that way it would be a massive deterrent because they'd be able to stop them launching the boats in the first place.
They may not want, thank you, Justin, they may not want to stop them. That's the thing. We're going to have to move on. 1 second, go on.
Coming back to integration, let's make sure that people can work properly and that also they have English lessons. That's a way to integrate people.
Okay.
We need to spend money
Thanks
to
for
do
your
that.
calls on this. Later we'll be asking whether it's selfish to mow your lawn.